Some say with a good sleep, you can see rainbows. You can fall in love again. There are people who've seen unicorns as well. That's the power of good sleep. And to get some, we've got someone who is an expert, Claudine Gillard, pediatric sleep coach from Sweet Dreams Sleep Coaching. Welcome to Dad Talks. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm really well. Thank you.
You've slept well.
I hope so.
Oh, that's so good. I haven't in a very long time. I'm a 9-month-old dad to a daughter. Her name is Alana. And I kid you not, like if you check my Whoop, I have slept 4.5 hours at max in last 9 months on a particular day. But it's not about me. It's about kids, it's about children, and that's what Dad Talks is all about. And Claudine, you being an expert, let's get to it right away.
Of course.
Can you explain what sleep training is and what it is not?
100%. So sleep training is teaching children to be independent for sleep, independent of help. Usually that's parental presence. So in other words, a child falling asleep in their bed. It is not leaving a child on their own to cry endlessly in order to sleep.
Because that is something that people do think that that's what sleep training is, that leave your kids, they'll cry to sleep, but that's not what it is, correct?
That is not what it needs to be, for sure.
Now, when it comes to sleep training, at what age can parents, start sleep training their child?
Any age that the parent is ready. I would say to parents, if you are ready to make a change, then your child is ready.
And that could be right now as well, at 9 months mark.
Could be 9 months, could be 9 weeks, could be 9 years.
Could be 9 years also. So
yeah.
it doesn't...
Age is not the relevant point.
What are the different methods of sleep training and how can we compare?
Okay, so you've got parental support versus lack of parental support. So you will have heard, I'm sure, of the quiet out method. It's very well known. It's not necessary. There are methods where you can be parentally present, you can give guidance, you can give help, you can give comfort to your child.
So these are the two approaches?
Well, there are multiple approaches within those realms. So it would be the no support or support. Awesome. And within the support, there's many ways in which you can approach sleep training.
Okay. Now, there are a lot of myths and misconceptions when it comes to sleep training because it's not a subject that people have deep dived. And that's what we are trying to do here. So what could be those myths and misconceptions according to you?
It really does come back to this thought process that you have to leave your child on their own for hours in their bed and they will do nothing but cry until eventually they give up and sleep. It literally does not need to be that way. As I said, there are many methods where you can give parental support.
Do those methods, can we describe a few or let's say 3 methods that are go-to methods when it comes to sleep training?
Sure. So 3 well-known methods, let's say, I would describe as Ferber, soothing ladder, and the chair method. Okay, so Ferber method is well known. It was devised by a doctor in the US, and it's called also known as controlled crying. Controlled crying means you're with your child for a certain amount of time, but you leave your child for a certain amount of time, and you increase the periods of time when you're away, and you decrease the periods of time when you're with them. The chair method, which is known as stay and support, is where you stay with your child sitting with them in a chair and near to their bed, and then you gradually move away night after night so that you're eventually no longer in the room when they fall asleep. And then the soothing ladder is 7 to 8 steps going up a ladder, if you like, of support. The first approach is to wait and then be present and then then voice, then touch, then pick up and then feed. So you're basically getting further and further towards help, and then you go all the way back to the start where you wait and then presence and then voice and then touch and so on.
Wow, that's extremely helpful. Now, when it comes to sleep training, and I'm pretty sure met so many parents,
Absolutely.
What are the most common challenges that parents face when it comes to this?
I mean, there's typically the biggest obstacle most parents have is how upset is my child going to get? How long is it going to take? What will it feel like for them? What it will feel like for me? What we know is that crying is children's main method of communication until they're obviously totally verbal. So let's say until they're at school. And so what we've got to understand is crying is communicating a need, and it's our job as parents to understand what that need is and then respond appropriately.
Yeah.
So if your child's crying because they're hungry, the only solution for that is to feed them. It's not like an adult who can have a cup of coffee and ignore this hunger feeling. If your child is got a full diaper, the only way that's going to be solved is by changing their diaper. If your child is tired and they've been fed and they've got a clean diaper, then it stands to reason the reason they're crying is that they're tired and they want to be asleep. So the way I approach this is to say, if we meet all the needs that the child cannot meet for themselves, and that leaves us with this one need that is tiredness, the sooner we help them to understand how they can fall asleep independently, the sooner the need to be upset about the fact they're tired has gone away.
Would you reckon that with the child, the parents also need training?
100%. I work with parents, I work with adults. My role is not to work with children. My role is to work with the parents and then work with their child. 90% of sleep training is parents.
One strong tip that you would like to give out to the parents when they are approaching you to understand what sleep training is, what would that be?
I would say make sure this is a priority for your family right now. If it's a priority for your family, it will go well, you will be confident, you will be calm, you will be motivated. If you're half in, half out, not sure, reluctant, nervous, tense, anxious, worried, it will be difficult, and that's not fair on you or your child.
So if they have to be emotionally strong when their child is crying, or if they have to be, I can't hear my child cry, how do I go about with this? I'm just going to go and pick him up one time and then it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So the discipline in this needs to be quite strong.
Yeah. You need to be consistent in the message that you're sending your child, because otherwise really what you're teaching them is to cry and you're going to come and fix the problem. And if our only objective is to reduce crying and minimize crying, anything that's going to create a longer term outcome of crying is not recommended. So when I work with parents, I'm coaching them quite precisely on how they should react relative to what they're experiencing. Just want to be clear, not all children cry and not all children cry that much, but if the single biggest obstacle is how much is my child going to cry and what do I do in that moment when they're upset, the focus needs to be on the priority and the goal and the objective, rather than right now my child's crying, I'm just going to respond right now and I'll worry about tomorrow night and the night after, tomorrow night and the night after.
That's so me.
Well, to be honest, that was me. And that is all parents. So my role is to coach around that point. It is not comforting children. It is just making sure that the objective is not forgotten.
Okay. And when it comes to co-sleeping, is it compatible with sleeping habits?
Well, put it this way, my son co-slept with me for 2.5 years and never slept well in 2.5 years. So from my personal experience, no. And from my professional experience, many parents come to me because they're co-sleeping. So clearly it proves that it's not working for them, otherwise they wouldn't be coming to me. There are obviously lots and lots of children that successfully co-sleep with their parents. So those aren't the parents I'm talking to. In my experience, for a child that's nursed or breastfed, co-sleeping will be more problematic because the proximity to the mother isn't that child was then well rested, it's that child's waking up a lot wanting to nurse. And if that child's old enough to sleep without nursing, depending on the age and weight gain and any health concerns or medical concerns, then actually the priority should be sleeping and not nursing. So what we're saying really is, what is the age and the circumstances of this child's life, and are they ready to be sleeping well relative to newborn baby, which will need to wake up multiple times and be fed. And if they're ready to be sleeping well, then that's the right thing for them, which typically means co-sleeping is not going to work well.
Okay, now I have a personal question when it comes to this co-sleeping as a habit. Alana, my daughter, she's sleeping in a bassinet, which is at the foot of our bed.
Yeah.
She's not sleeping in between both of us.
Yeah.
What I've heard and what I've experienced is the more closer you keep your child with you, it helps in their emotional health, physical health. The cortisol levels drop. They are much more at peace and calm. Whereas sleep training is the completely opposite of it. Is that true or am I wrong?
Well, look, it comes down to some extent to personal preference by the parents, okay? If you want your child to be in your bedroom and you are willing to tolerate baby noises being emitted from her during the night, which is normal and natural and will happen and not a problem, children shouldn't be silent just because they're asleep, but you potentially are going to be disturbed by her sounds, then there's no issue with her room sharing with you. Does it mean that a child who is not room sharing is going to have a lack of attachment to their parent? There is no evidence to back that up, okay? It doesn't mean to say that a child who is room sharing with their parent and a child who's sleeping in a bedroom separately has less or more cortisol. because what we do know is children that don't sleep well have raised cortisol. So if we're talking just on the topic of cortisol and the objective is to reduce cortisol, a good night's sleep will reduce cortisol. So
That is
fundamentally.
brilliant. You just simplified it. It's not, because obviously, there are two aspects to it. One is the Western, wherein, we're going with this,
Yeah.
which is keeping your child in a different room, not just letting them cry. No, that's not what we are saying here. Or having them with you, and then all three of you, if you have one child, have disturbed sleep. Because I'm not going to be able to sleep like I started off with. I have had 4.5 hours of sleep in the last 9 months every night. That's it. Which is not good because my cortisol levels are high, and so is the case with my child.
Yes.
And that's where sleep training comes in. All right, the next question. How does sleep training change with twins or siblings?
Sure, good question. I've worked with about 100 pairs of twins, and I very, very rarely recommend, well, in fact, I've never recommended to parents that they separate their twins. I have worked with 2 sets of twins that were sleeping in separate rooms, but by the parent's choice. In my experience, keeping twins together is always better. They benefit, they want to be close to each other. Now, obviously, with twins, you've got double the joy and double the challenge. One could be asleep, the other could be awake. One could be asleep and the other could wake that one up. However, they will learn to tolerate each other's noises and sounds, because as a parent, you're tuned into your child's responses, you're tuned into your child's communication. The twin is tuned into its sibling, but it's not from a place of care or from a place of responsibility, because they're obviously the same age. They're not looking after each other. So I have known many twins where one's asleep and the other one's crying, and the one that's asleep isn't disturbed by the other one crying.
And that's very normal.
Exactly. And the same with siblings. So I would encourage parents that room sharing is actually a very good and positive experience for the children.
So everyone with twins or siblings,
No
make
issue.
note.
Yeah.
When it comes to the afternoon naps, siesta as they call them,
Yeah.
is it good for kids?
Definitely. People need to embrace naps. There's a bit of a misconception about if you reduce your child's naps, they'll sleep better. We know that sleep breeds sleep. The more sleep you have, the more sleep you want, the more sleep you take. So daytime sleep supports nighttime sleep supports daytime sleep.
So all those parents out there who are saying that, I'm not going to let her sleep in the afternoon or him in the afternoon so that the child can have a longer night's sleep, that is not true.
Not in my experience. Depending on the time of day and the age of the child, but typically until a child is 14 months, they should be having 2 naps a day.
2 naps a day plus a long night's sleep.
Correct.
Wow. How should parents handle night wakings or early risings? That is a question from the heart.
I understand. Okay. Firstly, the room should be completely pitch black at all times of day when the child is asleep. So in other words, you cannot see your hand in front of your face, whether it's 10 a.m, noon, 4 p.m, 6 a.m. So that means that the child doesn't know that the sun has risen, which obviously then means there's no cause for a wake up unnecessarily as a starting point.
And no night lights.
No night lights for children under the age of, say, 3. Some children
3 years.
3 years old, exactly. Some children from 3 years old onwards will ask for a nightlight, but it's more of a reassurance than a necessary, okay? We have a hormone called melatonin that helps us to sleep. Melatonin is suppressed by light. So if a nightlight is used, it should be a red light, because red light does not suppress melatonin. In answer to the question about early and night wakings, what you've got to think about is, how did your child fall asleep? If your child fell asleep in a place that's not the place they find themselves in now, in other words, they were held, they were nursed, they were carried, they were rocked, and now they've woken up in their cot or bassinet or crib, they are going to think, where am I and how did I get here? So if we want to prevent a night waking, what we want to do is ensure they fall asleep in the place they wake up. And that goes for an early morning wake up as well.
Okay, I really have to change a lot of
So you
stuff.
can, this resonates, doesn't it? You can say it straight away. You're all immediately thinking, well, of course she doesn't know what to do. She's woken up in a place she didn't fall asleep in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she still wouldn't know that she has.
would not know, because she's 9 months old.
And why rock her to sleep? Is that a right thing to do?
Again, personal choice. From a longevity of the nighttime sleep, comes back to, if she's now thinking, what do I do? I've woken up here. I was in Daddy's arms, the last thing I remember. I don't know how to go back to sleep without Daddy. Daddy, come get me and rock me back to sleep. That's the communication when she cries at 2 a.m. Daddy, you need to rock me. You rocked me at 7 or 8 p.m. where have you gone? She's gone from conscious to unconscious in your arms. So she didn't know what happened after she went unconscious.
So basically, I need to improve my thing and not. Yeah, I know what exactly you're saying. You train us.
Depending on what you want.
All right. Now a very important question. What about sleep training? For kids with special needs.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've worked with a lot of special needs children in my career. I have a son with additional needs. It's a subject very close to my heart. And I educate myself all the time relative to his needs so that I can answer questions that parents approach me about. It does depend on the need and the issue. I've worked with children, for example, with Down syndrome, and I've worked with children with autism, just to take two examples. Typically, children thrive on boundaries and routine and scheduling. So it doesn't really change the fact that they've got special needs, that they need those things. They need those elements in their life. And that's really a big part of sleep training, creating a regular pattern for the child, creating a regular timing of their day around when they should feed, when they should play, when they should sleep, and also restricting certain aspects to their day close to sleep time. So no high energy play close to sleep, no screen time, no bright lights. That applies to children with special needs and children without special needs.
Okay. Are there any cultural differences when it comes to sleep training practices? Like you have, I got recommended for you by a friend who belongs to our community, like the Desi community. And then there is a Western aspect of it. Are there many cultural differences when the, subject is approached?
I mean, from my side, I'm always grateful when somebody who's outside my culture reaches out to me, because they obviously realise that I don't appreciate exactly what happens in that culture, but they obviously consider me to be a professional on the topic. What I always try to do is align everything that the parents require as much as is realistically possible relative to what their child's sleep needs need to be. So if the parents say to me, great, I hear everything you're saying, Claudine, but we're not prepared to make that child sleep in their own bedroom, I say, fine, doesn't stop us from having success. There is no reason why you can't share a room with your child and successfully have your child sleeping through the night. If you're wanting to share a bed, okay, well, there are co-sleeping guidelines that have to be followed from a safety perspective, but it's still possible. If my recommendation is bedtime at a certain time, but culturally that doesn't fit, then we give it a try and we see how the child responds. So we can tailor make things relative to that family's preferences and circumstances, but the fundamentals will always remain that the obviously objective is that the child falls asleep independently in some point in the future so that they sleep through.
Thank you very much for that. I think that tailor-made option is brilliant, because generalizing major fundamentals is brilliant, but when it comes to, like, for example, one small little patch of difference would be traveling. You travel, and like even today, I'm like 40 years old. My biorhythm changes. Like if I'm traveling to west or east, if it's a 6-hour flight, 7-hour flight, the dehydration and the sleep patterns.
Of course.
Is there anything when a parent can do for their kids during this time?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. We want to prepare for different climates and different situations. You want to keep things as similar to home as possible in terms of the habits that they're used to. So if they have a favourite cuddle toy, you're going to want to bring that with you. You've also got to recognise that their sleep needs don't change just because you've got on an aeroplane. So you need to align the timings relative to the local time, but obviously shifting it relative to UAE time. So if you've moved ahead 2 hours, they may still be on a UAE schedule and then want to get them on local time schedule as soon as possible. Things like ventilation may not be possible here, but is possible outside of the region. Obviously air quality here, we wouldn't want to have our windows open all night, but if you're in Europe, you maybe choose to do that. You want to obviously be conscious that the child's in a safe and appropriate sleeping space. So, a baby crib if you've got a baby, or a toddler bed if you've got a toddler. And then obviously being conscious of the climate. We live in a place that's very hot. We're pretty used to being hydrated well, but clearly that's still important even if you're outside of this region.
Thank you very much for that. And the last question would be, what tools or products do you recommend or caution against for helping children sleep better?
I love this question. There are a couple of really important ones that I would recommend. First is total blackout in the room, as I said. So you can get film from Amazon that you can stick on the windows that basically blacks out the windows. You can have a travel blind that does the same if you go abroad, or you can get your guide to come round and fit curtains that are completely flush to the window. Blackout for sleep is super helpful because of this hormone melatonin that I mentioned earlier. I would also recommend white noise. White noise is basically a background sound that's constantly played. It can be brown noise, it can be pink noise, but it's basically a shh type of sound. It could be waves, it could be womb, heartbeat, that type of thing. What that does isn't necessarily make the child sleep better. What it does is prevent the potential for environmental sounds to wake them up. So in other words, we're at home, baby's sleeping well, doorbell goes, dog barks, truck goes down the street, someone's drilling next door, child gets woken up when they wouldn't have otherwise been had they not heard that sound. So it masks the sound. There's been studies done on this in New York. They did it with adults, but they gave them white noise for a week. It took the white noise away. They slept much better with the white noise than they did without. So, I know we're not living in New York, but the point still is worth making. I also would recommend sleep sacks as opposed to blankets and covers for children up to 4 years old. Sleep sack is a wearable blanket. Again, it's a safety concern to not have loose bedding in a child's bed. Things I wouldn't recommend, essentially the crib that a child sleeps in should be totally empty of anything. So, in other words, I wouldn't recommend a mobile, I wouldn't recommend a crib bumper. Both of those are not going to be supportive of sleep, and in fact, a crib bumper is a safety hazard.
And teething toys and anything.
Teething toys are okay if they are age appropriate and they're obviously got the safety measures of the construction of them. As an example, I'm not a big fan of pacifiers because if you have to wake up to put the pacifier back in your child's mouth, not only if you had to wake up, but your child has to as well. If your child wakes up and the pacifier is clipped to their body, or their clothing I should say, and then they can put it back in, at least you haven't had to wake up. They have had to, but at least you haven't had to. As long as they're old enough to have the clip and it's safe and so on, that is a good, helpful product to use for children that use pacifiers. I'm not a big fan of pacifiers because plenty of people contact me because their child's pacifier dependent. So if pacifiers worked, they wouldn't need me, obviously, if it worked for sleep anyway. But pacifiers aren't unhelpful for daytime crankiness. And so I wouldn't say ditch the pacifier entirely. I'd just say consider not using it for sleep.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. Now, this camera, all three cameras, say one beautiful thing according to you that sleep does to your child.
No one's ever been worse off from more sleep. Your child will thrive, will grow, develop, mature. You will see so much change in them. And the feedback I get from my clients is they cannot believe the difference in their child from when they started sleep training to when they finish with me.
Amazing. How many hours of sleep is good for a child?
Most children need between 10 and 12 hours of overnight sleep and up to 4 hours of daytime sleep, depending on their age.
City 1016.